From the West Coast to the East Coast, Anthony Cartinella helped bring Orange County drum and percussion to a new scene. As an O.C.D.P. retailer in New Jersey, he introduced drummers to the bold designs and custom sounds that made the brand stand out during its rise. This is the Fully Vented Podcast. Now here's your host, Jared Fallon.
Hey guys, welcome to the Fully Vented Podcast. This week's guest hails from the East Coast, from dealing Orange County drums right here in my home state of New Jersey, to creating his own brand of drums, Darkhorse Percussion. If that wasn't enough, he launched Black 35 Guitars. Please welcome to the show, Anthony Cartinella.
What's up?
Hey man, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. I think it's awesome.
So, yeah. So I have a very important question to start off with, and depending on how you answer this is going to depend on how this interview and episode goes.
All right, cool.
Are you a Taylor ham or are you a pork roll kind of guy? What is it?
You know what's hard? I grew up in Linden, New Jersey, which is we'll call it more North Jersey. However, I've lived down the shore now for probably about 15 years. So I go over one bridge and it kind of changes. Your pork roll, your Taylor ham. So I'm kind of more pork roll now, but I grew up Taylor ham.
Mike the editor here. And as a former New Jerseyan, I would just like to say that it's pork roll. You don't put Hellman's on your sandwich. You don't put Heinz on your burger. You use mayo. You use ketchup. You eat pork roll. That's it. It's pork roll. Taylor ham is just a brand.
Yeah, no, same thing. I grew up in South Jersey. It's pork roll. Taylor ham was I had no idea what that was. And then I moved to Jersey City. Same thing. Everyone's like, we went from a hoagie to a hero and a sub with Taylor ham. I'm like, I don't know what any of that means.
Yeah.
But we're good now. Yeah. Figured it out.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Just because I grew up one way and then the rest of my life has been another way. So
yeah, people seem to forget. I consider New Jersey two separate states. You got north or south.
Yeah, basically, it's very debatable.
But yeah, man, let's take it back. So when did you? Well, one, are you a drummer, and when did you start playing drums?
Yeah,
I know the answer.
Yeah, I mean my background is percussion. I've grown up being a drummer. Like my whole life. Percussion was always my big thing. I did my undergrad degree was in music education and percussion performance for my plethora of degrees that I have. And I taught, concert band and musical theater for over 20 years, about 25 years. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And currently
so this runs deep.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, music and percussion, music ed was always my first like real passion, percussion. I really, when I was in middle school and high school, I really got into drums. Certain things really caught my attention. I thought were really cool, in like the mid to late 80s. I mean, Metallica was kind of a game changer. But before that, I mean, I was really into like Buddy Rich, it was awesome. And then by the time I got to high school, I got introduced to marching band and drum corps. And that opened up like a totally different world,
Yeah, totally.
As far as what I did. And then I went on and I did drum corps in a couple different organizations. I marched with this all ages group called the New York Skyliners for a number of years. I went on to be the director of that corps, as well as I was a couple of years as percussion arranger, instructor, coordinator. And then, I marched another corps, the Crossman Drum Corps. And it's funny too, because when we were talking before we started recording, like mentioning Chad Sexton, who has a little drum corps background, I believe with the Colts. And it's funny with Orange County because many, many, many years ago, I wrote a book called The Black Book, which was all basically marching percussion etudes. And I remember one time talking to Josh Lamb out at Orange County. And he was like, hey, you know who's here right now? I'm like, no, I was calling to like order something. He was like, oh, you know who's here right now? I was like, oh, who? He's like, oh, Chad Sexton. He really likes your book. because I sent him out like a few copies of it. So it was kind of funny,
No, no shit.
especially back then when Chad
No.
Smith was playing Orange County, and like 311 was really kind of
Mhm.
like, catching their stride at that time. It's kind of cool. But yeah, percussion to
Yeah,
answer your
I mean,
question.
I don't think people realize Chad was like a, he's got chops. He was a drum corps guy, hardcore.
Yeah, yeah, he had a lot of that stuff. I mean Travis Barker too. He didn't, as far as I know, I don't believe he did drum corps, but he did a lot of other stuff
Um,
on, I want to say, college or high school level. He still like noodles around some videos you find out there.
yeah, totally. But like going back, so your drum corps days, but before that, do you happen to remember, because just for our nitty-gritty listeners out there,
Yeah,
what was your first drum kit?
my first drum kit was a white Tama Rockstar. That was my first drum set. Yep, it was
Right on.
my first drum
And
set.
do you still?
No, I do not.
Oh, I'm sorry, go
Do
ahead.
not. I actually sold it to a student of mine, um, my buddy Josh, who I grew up with. I sold it to him, and it was funny too with that Tama Rockstar. That was at a time when, it's kind of funny because that was at a time when, this was like late '80s. Again, Metallica, was big. Lars Ulrich. There was a small crew of guys back then. You had Lars. You had, I'm drawing a blank. The number, I think Joey Kramer, the drummer from Aerosmith, if that's his name,
Hmm.
I think.
Yes.
Lars, Joey Kramer, and Greg Bissonette, who used to play with
Wow.
David Lee Roth and a bunch of other guys. In the late 80s, those guys all kind of introduced, and this kind of goes with Orange County, and I saw you have a new post coming out with powder coating.
Hmm.
And Lars, Greg Bissonette, and Kramer from Aerosmith, they came out like this, like 1988, 89, this new thing where their drum set, like Lars came out there with like this big, like gunmetal gray drum set with black hardware.
Hmm.
And it was just like the coolest looking thing to me. And my old Tama Rockstar, I took all the hardware off, and this is years and years before I started Darkhorse. I took all the hardware off and I like rattle can spray painted it all black and stuff like that in the yard, put it back on to make it look kind of like cool. So it was like this white kit with black hardware long before I knew what powder coating was. But those three guys at that time introduced like this whole new thing. Like, wow, they got white hardware on a kit or black hardware. It was totally appealing to me. And then years later, learning about this concept of powder coating, and some companies like Orange County, I always hold near and dear as kind of the game changer when it came to custom, which, a lot of history there. So
Yeah, totally. I remember vividly both. Ricky Rocket had a DW kit with like
yeah,
with powder coating. I
yep,
think it was like lime green, and then yeah, Greg Bissonette had that kit with the with David Lee Roth with the white
yeah,
hardware. Those massive like 22 by like 32, the Alex Van Halen thing with the
oh
long
yeah,
kicks. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure at the time that was a very game-changing thing.
for sure. Like it was just something like more. It was the first time you saw hardware that wasn't traditionally chrome. That was the first time you saw hardware that was anything else. Like you either saw like chrome hardware, and then down the road with percussion companies, you saw some like gold hardware. And but then the powder coating happened, and then kind of opened up the door to that, and then black chrome and black nickel and all that stuff. So, but it was cool.
Yeah, I only remember gold if you were like Louis Belson.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But when did you actually start getting into the music retail side of things?
It's really funny with that because I actually wrote a book. It's out there. I've sold it. It's on Amazon, and it's called "A Blessing and a Curse: The Business of Music Monsters and Mayhem," and that is basically my business memoirs since I was a little kid, and I really dig
Oh
into
wow.
of these elements. So I'll send you a link so I could get you
Yeah,
a couple
totally.
copies. It was a fun one. I had it released last year, last Halloween. It's done really well. It's like I said, it's up on Amazon. I'm gonna have it on my new Black 35 page. But it was good, and it was just kind of like a labor of love of my love of. I have this duality in me because I have this business background that I have done a lot of businesses, created and built up businesses over the last 20, I mean, almost 30 years now. But then I have my other side where I'm, Dr. Cartinella, and I'm an educator. I'm a dean of students. That's
Mhm.
like my alter ego, my like Clark Kent kind of thing. But what really got me into the business side, I talk about in my book, there was something just about, I always loved this idea of creating something, creating or selling things. And for myself, where I really dug into things was it was around 1997, I think, when I started Darkhorse. And Darkhorse spawned out of my background of marching percussion and drum corps and being this Kevlar kid, and going to my local music stores. Like, we had like Sam Ash Music, and Guitar Center wasn't really out here. So we kind of had Sam Ash, and then we had like some little mom and pop shops. But I remember
Yeah.
going to some of these stores and asking about marching percussion gear, asking about um, marching drumsticks, Kevlar heads, other method books, other practice pads, and I would go to these music stores, and they 9 times out of 10, the guys working there had no idea what I was talking about. I'm asking about one thing. They maybe had one dusty pair of marching sticks under the cabin, under the counter.
Wow.
And it was kind of like, I didn't like it. There was this other guy, Dennis DeLucia, who's a big drum corps guy. He had his own store up in, I believe it was Bloomfield or Belleville, New Jersey. And it was like in the seediest area in the world, but all he did was specialize in like marching stuff. And I thought it was great. So I had the idea to be like, you know what? I mean, I forgot how old I was at that time. Not terribly old. I was in my 20s. Um, and I had the idea, like, I'm going to start my own percussion company. And my mother was a paralegal for one of the largest law firms on the East Coast and the largest in New Jersey. And I went to her, and this was 1997 or 98. And I said to her, I was like, hey, you know what? I have an idea. I want to open up my own drum business. What do I need to do? And she did the paperwork for me. And she initially created Darkhorse Percussion. Darkhorse was a term that I pulled out of when I marched drum corps with this group, the Crossmen. We were kind of known as the dark horse of the circuit that year because we had this massive, powerful drum line that was just kind of coming out of nowhere. And we would be at shows, and people in the crowd would start yelling it out at quiet moments. So the name for
Oh,
the
okay.
company came really quick to me. And I said to my mother, I was like, I want to start a company. I'm going to call it Dark Horse Percussion. I met with a buddy of mine at a local pub. My buddy passed away years ago, my buddy Sean Holton. And I met with him to hang out. And I was like, hey, I'm looking to start my own company. I was like, this is what I'm looking to do. And he gave me a check for $100 to start my company. He was like, here you go, take this check. And I'm like, all right. So I had my first $100, and my mother did all the paperwork for me, set it all up, and started, Dark Horse Percussion, sole proprietor. And I had my little card and everything. And my initial goal at Dark Horse was to sell and specialize in marching and orchestral percussion equipment, mallets, sticks, heads, even eventually drums to sell. That's how it all started, the initial side of the retail. And then the custom stuff came a little bit later. My father and I working on building some like one-off drums, and it kind of,
Interesting. So it kind of just spanned from necessity.
yeah, yeah,
You just
totally.
couldn't find. Yeah. Okay.
100%.
Interesting.
It was the idea of, I came home, and I was, maybe like 23, 24 at the time. And I came home, and I was like, these places don't know what I'm talking about. So let me just create it. out of, like you said, out of necessity. And I did. And I like just started out, and I was trying to then have accounts with some of these companies. So here I am. I'm like, hi, I'm Anthony Cartinella, owner of Darkhorse Percussion. And I'm trying to hook up with companies, and it was very hard because I had no baseline. I was just some company.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, my first company distributor took me on was this company called Honer, and they carried certain items that I could have. Like they had like Sabian cymbals, and they had like Evans drum heads before they were really popular, some Ludwig heads, some sticks. And then it kind of grew because then eventually I got hooked up with Vic Firth. I got hooked up with Universal Percussion. Um, and then my story with Pearl was kind of funny. That happened, probably within the first 2 years, because I reached out to Pearl because they're the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest and best when it comes to marching and orchestral percussion. And I reached out
Mm-hmm.
to Pearl in
Totally.
Nashville, and I said, hey, I want to do, what do I have to do to carry your drums? And they're like, all right, well, we fill out the paperwork and we'll send out one of our reps to come see you, and we'll see what we could do to set you up. I was like, awesome. So one day I'm at my parents' house in Linden, because the original mailing address for Darkhorse was my parents' house. And next thing this guy shows up to the side of my parents' house. This dude, Steve Chaka, great guy, works with Pearl. I think he recently retired with Pearl. And he's kind of standing there with his little attache case and stuff. And he was like, is this Darkhorse Percussion? And I'm like, one and only. He was like, are you Anthony? I'm like, yep. He was like, all right. He was kind of like smirking. I was like, oh, come on in. And we walked down to my parents' basement, and I had 3 metal racks all lined up in their basement that were just stocked with marching mallets, sticks, drum heads, random components and parts and stuff. And he was just kind of looking around my parents' basement, like laughing, like, so this is Darkhorse. I was like, yep. And this was something I was trying to do before, like, the internet was really a marketplace for buying stuff.
Yeah.
Like, this was me going to like a drum corps practice or a high school, being like, "Oh, here's your stuff you ordered." And he came in and he just looked around and he was like, "All right," and he took a chance with me and he was like, "I'll let you open up an account." And he was like, "But you got to open up with however much it was. It was a substantial amount of money. I think it was like for you to open up as a Pearl dealer, you got to open up with it was like at the time I want to say like $5,000 or $8,000 to open up as a dealer. And I'm like, all right, all right.
Ooh, back then that was a lot. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot
Like
of
I'm just
money.
thinking about it.
Yeah, totally. And I was like, okay. But then I had a buddy of mine who became a band director out in Pennsylvania at Upper Darby High School out in Pennsylvania. And he knew that I was selling stuff. I was dealing, drum corps goods. And he was like, hey, are you dealing with Pearl yet? I was like, actually, I just set up with Pearl, but I need to open up. And he just became the band director there. And he was like, well, you know what? I need a whole new set of drums. And he basically had a blank check from their board of ed to order a full set of marching percussion equipment and mallets and all this stuff. So I, next thing you know, called my buddy Steve with Pearl. I'm like, hey, I got an order in. And he was like, all right, cool, awesome. And it was like probably an $18,000 order at the time. It was a big one. And
Yeah.
that's how I kind of opened up. But that was just like another element of kind of how retail initially started with Darkhorse. The retail faded out once I started getting into the custom. But that's how it initially
Gotcha.
started with my retail side of things.
Yeah, for our listeners out there, if you go into a retail store now, especially in the music world, usually if you are a dealer of something, whether it be Pearl, DW, there's usually things in place where you have to order a minimum of something and there has to be X amount of dollars of said merchandise. Or like, I remember my buddy working at a guitar shop where somebody would walk in like, oh, you don't have any Gibson. It's like, well, no, because you need $150,000 of merchandise at any time.
Sure.
And it's like you just can't, so it's kind of crazy that they took a chance on you just walking into a basement and you're like, oh,
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it was
But
funny. I remember it yesterday with Steve Jacob, and he kind of looked around. He was like, "All right, we're going to open you up," and they had like I think three different levels of the kind of discount you get as a dealer. So he opened me up initially with like a gold level, which was like your initial like $5,000 to open up, and then I think after this open order, he like bumped me up to the next one, and it was cool with that. But that's when the retail, I was really focused on the retail side of things. I wasn't doing the custom side of things yet, but that's like a whole other conversation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, before we dive into that, so you're dealing with the, marching and orchestral instruments. How on earth did you hear about Orange County and then later become a dealer of Orange County? Because for just, you think of, here's Beethoven with orchestral music. How did you go from that to, Limp Bizkit break stuff? Like I just,
Yeah, yeah,
what a transition.
it was interesting. That's it's a great question. Um, Orange County, before I started building custom, like I hooked up with Orange County. I had a buddy of mine who he was a student of mine, and then he worked with me for years with Darkhorse, and then eventually became one of the owners of Darkhorse the first time that I sold the business. My buddy John, um, he was the one who kind of hipped me to Orange County back in. I mean, it was probably like 99, 2000 maybe. Um, Not too far into my initial run with Darkhorse, and I saw these drums that were really cool and really unique. Um, it's funny because prior to that, I was a big fan of like Pork Pie percussion because
Mhm.
Pork Pie was like this custom drum company. It was very niche before you really saw Orange County drums. Pork Pie had, Bill Dedamore there. I mean, I have a funny story
Mhm.
with those guys too. Um, he had,
Bill's the man, by the way.
yeah, I mean, he was super good. And like a little sidebar on that, just mentioning Bill, when I started getting into building custom drums, he used to sell me parts before I was dealing directly with some of these
Oh,
whole. And it's really funny because when I first started doing it, I hooked up with him, and he was super awesome. And like he was already dealing with a company like a World Max or
mhm.
Sunlight, like some of these other companies, because he was building custom drums long before it was popular. Like that was his
Oh,
drum company.
absolutely.
It just wasn't Pearl or Yamaha or DW or Tama. It was Pork Pie, and it was very niche at the time. But my buddy John, he hit me to Orange County. I started seeing this, and I always remember seeing John Otto. I'm a big Godzilla fan. I remember John Otto had one of his Limp Bizkit kits that had like this wacky material on it. Like I'm a big fan of your like vintage 60s and 70s, like the swirly kind of designs on the drums,
So the satin
like the
flames
satin
kind
flame.
of very,
Yeah, I was a big fan of
yeah.
that. And it's funny with Orange County because I'm going to piggyback on that. Um, with the satin flame stuff, he had this like black, but it looked almost like Godzilla's skin, whatever, and it was just a different material. And I was like, "That's cool." And then started seeing these other drums that they were putting out that were just like unlike anything else out there. A totally different look. Um, they made they didn't create it, but because I know it's debatable with all your keyboard commandos out there, they didn't create.
Yeah, right.
They did not create the idea of stripes. They did not create the idea of offset lugs, but they made it popular for sure. Um,
Mhm.
and all this stuff, my buddy John was like, whatever, and I'm a good salesman. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna call up Orange County and I'm gonna find out. Because at that time, there was no dealer in New Jersey for Orange County. No official dealer.
Nope, you were the only one, or
Yeah,
became the only one.
yeah. Like you would go
Yeah.
on their website and you'd see their dealers, you'd see New Jersey, you would see Darkhorse Percussion and would have my parents' address,
Hmm.
literally. And
That was actually your parents' address? I didn't
yeah,
know that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If you see a Linden address, that's my parents' house. Um,
Whoa.
and it was funny because I called them up, and that was the first time I spoke to Josh Lamb. And I remember talking to Josh. I'm like, hey, I'm Anthony Cartinella. I own, Darkhorse Percussion out here in New Jersey. I was just curious, like, what can we do to like sell your drums and sell your products? And he spoke to, the powers that be, and it was like kind of a slam dunk in just a couple minutes. It's like, all right, cool, we'll set you up. And I remember at the time he was like, okay, to become a dealer, you need to order. I always remember you had to order 2 drum sets, and you have to order at least 2 snare drums, and one of them has to be a 20 ply. So I was like, awesome. My
Oh,
buddy
okay.
John, yeah, that's how they opened you up as a dealer. You had to get 2 drum sets and 2 snare drums. So I'm like, all right, cool. So I go back to my buddy John, who was starting to work for me, and he was a student of mine, and he was just ecstatic. So he wanted to order a kit. So I'm like, cool, here we go. And he ordered like this yellow drum set and a yellow 20 ply snare drum, Baltimore lugs, like the old school before they did their
Hmm.
like shark tooths, which to this day is an awesome looking lug. Um, so he
Hmm.
did that. So I'm like, well, I guess I got to order a drum set too. So I actually ordered my first Orange County kit was a blue satin flame kit with the chrome Baltimore
Nice.
lugs, offset lugs, and I don't recall what color snare drum I got, but I got a kit for myself, and John's family bought him a kit, and we had the 2 snare drums. And that's how I became a dealer with Orange County, because it was funny because I was the only dealer for Orange County, but there was a company, there was a music shop from North Jersey that I remember talking to the guys at Orange County that they were really upset with, and they were, trying to get a handle on. There was a company in North Jersey that was trying to claim they were a dealer, and this music shop was taking money from people to order and never like order
Oh,
stuff, because
wow.
I had a number of people reach out to me, and they're like, "You're the only officially like licensed, Orange County dealer in New Jersey,"
Hmm.
and I'm like, "Yeah." It's like, "Oh, what about this music store?" I was like, "I don't know anything about them." And then they ended up getting like shut down with that kind of stuff, but it was like really shady what they were trying to do. But for New Jersey, like it was me, you know, which was fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember seeing it on the site, so same thing. Like, you couldn't, again, infancy of the internet. It's not like if you saw pictures, like their website later, kind of got up to par, but at the time it was very archaic, and the only
Oh
way
yeah,
you really ever saw these things were on, live in person or on, I know this foreign concept of TRL or MTV, or
yeah,
you would
right.
just see a live performance somewhere. So that was the only time you could see them. So I remember, scouring it and finding out that, oh, okay, there's a guy in Jersey. And I remember trying to convince my parents, because again, I lived in South
Yeah,
Jersey, trying to convince them, like, can we drive to North Jersey to go
yeah,
look at drums, just to look at them?
yeah, yeah.
No.
I know.
It wasn't an option. But yeah, that was one of those things that was always so cool that I was like, Jersey has Orange County, because it was such a West Coast thing and such a West Coast vibe that it was so cool to get it over to Jersey. So for me, that was like one of those things.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it was cool, and I mean, to be perfectly honest, like I didn't, even though I was the only dealer in New Jersey, um, they like I didn't like sell like a ton of drums over the time. Like I sold a handful, because also back then, like Orange County, I mean, it was pretty expensive at the time, you know.
Hmm.
By today's standards, it's probably about normal, but when they were first doing their custom stuff, like it was a pretty lengthy time. But I mean, I sold maybe like 10 drum sets over the years with them. Nothing crazy.
Okay.
I had a number of people who would roll up to my parents' house, like, "Is this Orange County?" Actually, a good friend of mine who is a band director and a musician down in Bradley Beach in Jersey. He was one of the guys who like showed up to my house. Like he showed up to my parents' house, like, "This is Orange County," and he ordered like this like Rasta style um, snare drum and stuff that was super cool. And I ended up building him a Darkhorse kit a few years later, but Yeah, it was really interesting. I had some cool orders, some cool experiences for sure.
Yeah, so can you walk me through what the process would have been like back then in order to order a kit? I
Yeah.
believe somewhere on their website, if you were to order direct, it was something along the lines of 50% down to start the kit, and then another 50, or the remainder of the balance once it's done. Is that kind of how somebody would order a kit through you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what I would do is I would um, same concept. If you were looking to order a kit, and the kit was, let's say, $1,500, you'd put half of it down, get the order in, then the other half when it came in or before it shipped out to me. That's kind
Gotcha.
of how
Okay.
we used to do it. Which even to this day, even with Black 35 and for years with Darkhorse, kind of took the same concept. If
Okay.
anything, I was a little bit more flexible on pricing because, like I said, I mean, I was always in education, and I always did my other businesses on the side, so it wasn't my full time bread and butter. So I was able
Mhm.
to actually work better deals with guys. It's like, hey, the price is this. If you don't have 800 to put down, I could turn around and be like, Jared, do you have 500? Cool, we'll get you going.
Mhm.
And guys over the years with Dark Horse and for the last 10 years with Black 35, they really appreciate that because I've always been the face of the business of like, I'm building your stuff, I'm selling your stuff, I'm handling your money, I'm shipping your stuff. So I'll work with you to make it successful. Um, but yeah, people would
Yeah.
just,
I guess it's a
they
little
would,
different. You kind of have guidelines.
yeah, I mean,
Sorry, I was
with,
gonna say like you probably sadly you can't work with that if your Pearl's probably like, hey, you can't do that.
yeah, I mean, it's hard too because you look at a lot of other companies, like they can't afford to do that. They can't afford to give you a little break if that's their full time job and they have so many people relying on. But yeah, but to like fully answer your question, I mean, if people looking to order, they would give a call. I had a different line at my parents' house at the time that was like the Dark Horse line that was hooked up to like a credit card machine in my bedroom.
Oh,
Like that was the
the knuckle
start.
buster.
Yeah, that was exactly like that was literally the start of you know the financial world of Dark Horse Percussion back then. It was like at my parents' house, a big computer desk, and this was before like the internet was anything like it is now. Um, but no, it
Hmm.
was good. Guys would just they would pay money, they would give me a credit card, or they would send me a check. I mean, like that kind of stuff. This is before Venmo and Zelle,
Wow.
PayPal, and all that
Hmm.
stuff.
So roughly how long would it take for you to actually get a kit from the time you placed an order? Because I know there was at their height of popularity, the wait times were probably through the roof.
Yeah, they. I mean, they always. A couple times I got some things from them. They would have like some one-off drums. I think, and as a business model, I know for myself today, it's always good to have some in-stock stuff. I'll have an in-stock item that I could sell at a little bit of a discount, like ready to go. People want instant
Hmm.
gratification. Um, but
Oh yeah.
normally, if you were calling, hey, I'm ordering this kit, most of their lead times were a lot longer than they would say they would be. um, but a lot of times they would be sitting at 9 months to a year. And
Okay.
once I got into the custom side of things, I had a better understanding of why those things happen sometimes. The length of
Hmm.
times, sometimes at the mercy of parts, shells, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But yeah, their normal lead time was, probably about 9 months, I
Hmm.
would say.
Well, also back then too, they didn't do a lot of things in-house, so I'm sure they were at the mercy of if they were outsourcing for paint or
Yeah,
powder coating, or like you said, waiting on parts, you're kind of, you just the wait game.
yeah. I mean, they would be at the mercy of that. Like they would have a local
Hmm.
painter who's painting their stuff. You know, they weren't like painting stuff there; they were wrapping stuff there. The supply
Hmm.
chain with building custom drums was a tough one. It was a tough one. It was also a very expensive one.
Hmm.
Shells, wrap, components, and all your custom companies. Um, that Orange County basically gave birth to. You know, SJC being the biggest one for sure.
Hmm.
Um, which I mean, I have some funny stories with those guys too. But they, you're at the mercy of like everyone's using like okay Keller for shells and World Max for with parts. Unless you're buying stuff direct from overseas, and then it's very expensive. Delmar for wrap, you know,
Hmm.
Golden. It was called at the time Golden Age for acrylic shells. You know,
Golden Times.
Golden Times, Golden Times. Yeah, great guy.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
used to meet that guy. I forgot. I think his name may have been George. Um,
I
I used
think
to,
so as well.
I used to meet him on the Parkway at a rest stop to pick up acrylic shells I ordered from him. Like, but yeah, it had all that. But sometimes if Delmar was out of stuff, if parts were out, if shells were behind, it would mess up the supply chain so much for Orange County. I remember talking to Max one time at Orange County, or it may have been Jeremy, and
Hmm.
waiting on stuff. And they're like, we're just at the mercy of Keller right now. He was like, we're literally just cleaning
Wow.
windows. He's like, we're like organizing what we have and cleaning windows, waiting on shells because they were the only game
Wow.
in
Yeah.
town for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah, well, also they were getting, think about it, Keller's a Northeast company,
Yeah.
they're what, New Hampshire?
Yeah.
So it would have to go over to Anderson's over in on the West
Yeah.
Coast where then you would have Spawn, Shine,
Yeah.
O.C.D.P, Masters of Maple. You would have all these other, California pork pie as well.
Sure.
Bill
Yeah.
probably, I'm sure, was at the time using Keller. So you have
Yeah.
all these guys on the West Coast just waiting, so I'm sure it was maybe first come, first serve, or whoever had the bigger order
Yeah.
would probably get priority.
You would have a lot of that kind of stuff. I had a few companies that would stock Keller shells that weren't Keller that I would constantly be trying to get, like Anderson's in California. Sometimes I'd reach out to them because they would have a large supply.
Hmm.
Universal Percussion, Columbus, Ohio, they would stock
Oh,
certain
that's
Keller
right.
shells, and I would sometimes they would have stuff arrive, and I would just clean them out. Like they would let me know I got a
Hmm.
delivery, and I'd be like, I just bought like 6 snare drum tubes, so I had them. But yeah, it was tough with that. But I think part of that has definitely affected a lot of the companies as far as their lead times and such.
Yeah, also at this, now it's kind of everything can kind of be like a one-stop shop once you set up, you know, again, not maybe on a big scale, but there's a lot of websites like I think like Drum Factory
Sure.
Direct, you can just one-stop shop or Drum Supply House,
Yep.
everything is under one roof where I'm sure back then too, okay, I need to order from this catalog,
Yeah.
lugs are coming from here, heads are coming from this place, throw-offs are coming from here. Oh, they're out of stock, so now I got to order. Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
it wasn't an easy feat to say the least.
Yeah. I mean, and some of those companies, and again, this is before they had any sort of like online web ordering kind of basis. Like you had to call them up and order it. Like
Yep.
Precision Drum in New York. I mean, they were a big one. I mean, they were doing stuff long before anyone. And
Hmm.
like Drum Supply House, they would have stuff. And certain companies I dealt with directly, like dealt direct with Keller with stuff. I dealt direct with World Max for parts. Trick used to make our throw offs. Um, we were sponsored by Remo and then eventually Evans. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, it definitely slows down the process. But percussion stuff is also very expensive. And I could see that's where companies get in a lot of trouble financially because of the cost of materials. It's very easy
Hmm.
to mismanage money for building drums quickly because the stuff's very expensive.
Oh yeah. Also for I still do it to this day, but definitely during the 2018 to especially during COVID, I was doing heavy restorations and rewraps for
Cool.
people, and I would give them a quote on something, right? And it would be like, okay, whatever, you're at like almost $600 in parts, right?
Yeah.
And then within, quote's good for whatever, 30 days, and then I don't know, 2, 3 days later, they'd be like, all right, cool, here's your deposit. And then I would go to order everything. And then you're like, wait, tube lugs just went up from, they were 733 the other day. Now they're, 940 today. You're like, oh, well, shit, I guess I'm eating that one.
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
parts were very expensive. Yeah, the parts were always tough. Tube lugs, especially. When you're like
Hmm.
$7, $8 a lug, like it's a lot,
Oh, yeah.
and you could save
Hmm.
by if you were ordering stuff in mass volume from overseas directly, but then you had to wait for it. You at that time had to come up with a lot more money, um,
Hmm.
and then have to get it shipped here, freight, and it was tough. It was tough. There was definitely with custom drums. It was a big one. You know.
Diving back, did you ever get to meet Daniel or
Yeah.
John, or did you ever go to the actual shop?
I never went to the shop, but I met those guys a couple times at NAMM.
Oh, right on. Okay.
Because I mean, it was like the coolest thing, even back then with very crude websites and stuff. Like when they would have a
Hmm.
day, like everyone, me and some friends of mine, would like every day go to check, or they post new pictures, new photos, and then they would dump photos, like new
Hmm.
stuff. You're like, that's so awesome. It was the coolest thing. They
Yeah.
would post like NAMM photos. I was like, ooh, this is cool. Yeah, but yeah, I never went to their shop, but I did meet the crew a couple times, a few different NAMM years. In like,
I'm sure this was this the height of Nam too, when they were
yeah,
just,
I mean, when Orange County was big, I mean, you're talking about. I mean, I saw them in. It was probably uh, 98, 99, 2000.
okay.
So like they had a cool NAMM booth. They had a lot of cool gear. It was neat, and I met those guys, and they
Yeah.
were they were cool. And it's funny because I've always said, and I've gone on record saying, it's like Orange County changed the face. I mean, I talk about it in my book. Like Orange County changed the face of custom drums. They did. I don't care what anyone says, and they gave birth to a bunch of these other companies, and some of them did okay, and some of them didn't do so okay. Because they came out, and then you had some of these babies came out. And you had Shine and Truth and Masters of
Hmm.
Maple and Chicago Percussion. You had some of these guys, just to name a few. Darkhorse, obviously, and SJC being the biggest one for
Hmm.
sure. They changed the face. They made it cool. They wanted everyone, like, they created it, which I also think was part of their downfall. I gotta say.
Yeah. It's also one of those things. They were very open about if you want to, because they were so cool and just welcoming that they would just have people, if you were to call and say, hey, can I come swing by the shop? They'd be like,
Sure.
yeah, and just fully open the curtain and go, hey, oh yeah, this is the where's the shells
Yeah.
come
Mm-hmm.
from, Keller. And I'm sure people once they realize, what's under the hood, it's like, okay, it's kind of a very basic
Sure.
operation when you break it down essentially. And drums, don't hate me for saying this, people, but it's like if you know how to use a fucking Phillips head, you can essentially
Yeah.
work on drums. So it opened that window for a lot of people like, hey, I like to tinker, or I like drums, or I've spray painted my old
Mm-hmm.
kit. I can
Yeah.
build drums. I think it gave people, and also gave people the opportunity to do it, but also the creativity. People started thinking, well, okay, I don't want to wait a year for a custom kit,
Yeah.
or I don't have the funds to, um, I don't have 4 or 5 grand to
Sure.
buy a kit. How about, oh, they get the parts from here.
Sure.
I can buy that and just do it myself. I mean, I even thought about it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I can do it.
Yeah. And I mean, totally. And they were very welcoming with that. And there were only to build drums, you only need certain parts. Like you need to be able to get this, and
Hmm.
this, and then you can build a drum set. You need the knowledge and the tooling
Hmm.
to do it right. I've broken a lot of eggs making stuff. I've had guys work for me, and they go to do something, and something is off, and you got one lug that's like janky, or the offset isn't truly 50%. It's something else, like it's hard. And then you blow through that money. Wrap is very expensive. When you're spending, $90 for a full sheet of glass glitter wrap, it's very nasty to work with if you don't have the right tools to cut it, if you don't have the knowledge to what are you going to do to have it be adhered to the shells. A lot of those things were tough.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, Orange County though, like they gave birth to so many of those companies, and they changed the face of it because they made custom drums cool. Where Pork Pie was neat, like really cool stuff, but Orange County had this very different thing. And they also had some
Hmm.
bands during that time. Like anytime you put on, like you reference, like MTV, like old school MTV, you put it on, boom, No Doubt, boom, Limp Bizkit, Blink 182 coming out. Those guys right there, Slipknot. You had some of the stuff,
Oh yeah.
that was like, I mean, Chad Sexton. You had all these things that were like, wow, no matter where you turned, you saw that round Orange County logo. And,
Hmm.
it was cool. And then, like I said, you had a bunch of these other companies that came out, majority of which have just fallen by the wayside.
I also break it down like this too. DW, California based, had a rise in
Yeah.
the 90s. I think they didn't realize they had some of these guys just sitting in their backyard. But if you went on the Billboard charts or turned on the radio, not just MTV, I mean, you're hearing Orange County whether you
Sure.
knew it or not. I mean, Stained were huge
Sure.
in the
Yeah.
in the late 90s, early 2000s. John Wasaka was rocking Orange County. I think people forget that. Like I laughed and told my producer we should pull up the Billboard charts from
Yeah.
1999 and go and do a check mark of how many bands were playing. I think it wasn't just, hey, we're making custom drums, but they actually had the big time artists actually
Yeah.
playing
Oh, for
them.
sure. I mean, you had, Taylor Hawkins was using Orange County in the beginning. I
Hmm.
mean, you had Taylor Hawkins. I mean, you had, um, yeah,
Abe
I mean, you had No
Cunningham.
Effects, you had Adam Willard. I mean, you had a lot of, it was the
Hmm.
company to be at. I feel like until SJC came on the scene, you know.
Yeah, I think the tides also at that time started to shift. So like that probably SJC for me, from an outsider's perspective, it was like maybe 2005,
Yeah,
2006 is when I started to see them.
yeah,
I think they said they established in 2000, but I didn't really know of them until then. And also when I broke it down at that time for music in 2005, 2006, the whole do it yourself and MySpace
sure,
thing started to get really big. You also bands like Blink 182 wasn't Blink
sure,
182. They were on a hiatus. I've said it before, everybody hates me on it. New metal was starting to, as far as
sure.
popularity goes, they were still making music, but I think that started to fade. And just, I think No Doubt was on
Sure.
hiatus as well. So basically, when all your big endorsers are not really putting out stuff anymore, it left the lane open for SJC to kind of swing in and do their thing.
They totally did. And those guys are great. Like those guys, Scott and Mike, are near and dear to me. Um,
Hmm.
their ups and downs and their drive to create something was great. And I don't care if they say it, admit to it or not. I'm gonna say it as my own opinion. I mean, Orange County gave birth to them. I think if there was never Orange County, there
Hmm.
would probably never have been SJC drums. There probably would have been a good chance that I never would have been building custom drums. Because I was building custom drums under Darkhorse before I was building custom drums, if that makes sense. Like my father and I were just making
Yeah.
one off snare drums, like drum set snares, orchestral snares. We were messing around with different lacquers and stains. My dad was really good at woodworking. My dad was also very pivotal. Like he developed a lot of the tools that we had in our shop for laying out drums efficiently and effectively. Like he built tools for me and
Hmm.
jigs to do like laying out tube lugs, laying out this, laying out bass drum spurs. Like he made me like tools, which was kind of cool.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
rad. Yeah, because if you didn't know, John Machado, his brother was the guy Joe who was making a lot of the tooling
Yep.
that essentially allowed them to build effectively and quickly, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But when did you start transitioning from both? I know you had built
Yeah.
drums under Cartinella
Yeah.
before it was Darkhorse, because I've seen a few of those things floating around. I know I've asked you
Yeah.
about them over the years, but when did that start to come into play, and then the retail started to um, dissipate, I guess?
Yeah. You know what it was? It's a great question. I initially started out doing the retail side of things. I was primarily focused on the marching and
Hmm.
orchestral stuff. I was dealing with drum corps, high schools, individuals, friends of mine. Did all that, and then my father and I were making some drums when I was in my undergrad years, and which is kind of one-off snare drums for guys. And then eventually I made a cool drum set for a friend of mine. A friend of mine was like, "Hey, could you make me a drum set?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So I made this drum set. It was terrible, but it kind of made sound. But you live and learn because you don't have a good understanding of, like, I didn't have a proper router table set up and the right bits and understanding certain things and cutting bearing edges and laying out lugs properly. Like, it was a lot of trial and error. Um,
Hmm.
but I figured it out and I made it. I was like, oh, this is cool. And I had badges. And at the time, they said Darkhorse Percussion. And it had like this little like chest piece and like a bass drum with like a keyboard mallet. And it said like custom made drums. And I built this kit for this dude, Tom. I was like, hey, this is cool. And then I built this other kit that was just a green, uh, what should we call it, acrylic drum set with some like terrible lugs on it. And I remember I made it and I played it for a bit and then I sold it on eBay. And I was like, wow, someone bought it. And then someone contacted me saying, hey, I saw this drum set you made. Could you make me one like it? I was like, all right, cool. And then at the time,
Hmm.
I was like, all right, well, Dark Horse at the time was the retail voice. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm going to do the custom. And I was like, I don't want to call it Dark Horse at this time. So I changed it to, I did Cartinella Custom Percussion. And my buddy Rob actually designed the logo for me to this day. That was just a Maltese cross, which was a symbolum from when I marched drum corps in the Crossmen. So it was like an iron cross, and inside it, it's a Cartinella custom percussion. And it was a material that I used that was called Acudome. That I saw this company in Canada using on their drums. And eventually, like, I think Truth used this material too, but I love the idea of the material. It was just like a clear material that had like a screen printing on it.
Hmm.
And I love the idea because I was like, I could put this on any surface and the finishes show through, but you could still see the logo. So then I started making a few of these drums. A few people were asking me for it. And then I'm like, wow, I think we're on to something here. And then I started making drums. Um, my buddy Rob, his younger brother is Chris Thatcher, who played SJC very early on, and then played Darkhorse for the rest of his time with Streetlight Manifesto, and then now he's a Pearl
Hmm.
artist, which he's always loved and rightfully so. Um, but I made him
Hmm.
a couple drums and I just started making like these one-off drums, and then my energy all started focusing on, rather than the retail marching orchestral stuff, my interest started focusing on making custom drums, and more people started coming to me looking for things, and I'm like, hey, I might be into something. And then kind of like,
Hmm.
all right, well, Cartinella custom percussion was going on for a while, and then over time I did away with it and just turned everything into Darkhorse. And it was very simple. Like the logo, my whole idea was I like simplicity. I don't need a big badge
Hmm.
on the drums that says like Anthony Cartinella's Custom Drum Company, Linden, New Jersey, kind of thing. I was like,
Hmm.
I just want to put the chest piece on it in like a vintage style bass drum crest, put a chest piece, and that's it. And on the bass drum heads, like old school, like jazz players, just chest piece, and that was it. And that's
Hmm.
what I did. But at that time, that's when I kind of stopped putting emphasis on selling the other stuff and more emphasis on I want to build drums, and that's kind of
Right
started
on.
it.
Did you ever call the guys at the shop in Orange County and say, hey, just a heads up, like this, I'm kind of shifting towards this, or did you ever officially say, hey, I'm no longer going to be a dealer or dealing retail?
You know what? They were really like cool with stuff because they knew that I was building drums, but I was also still selling their stuff if someone wanted.
Hmm.
So they were cool. They didn't really care because I think their mindset at the time was it doesn't matter that you're selling these drums because we're still selling all these other drums. So they didn't really care. So they were kind of like
Hmm.
supportive. I wasn't like lowballing them. I wasn't, hey, you're calling me looking for an Orange County. Hey, you don't need that. Take my stuff. I would give people the option. Some people went my way. Some people went, I want Orange County kid. I've been saving for a year for this thing. And it's like, okay, so I'll sell it to you. I'm making money no matter what. So one of them, I'm doing all the work and making money.
Hmm.
The other one, I'm making a phone call and making money. So it was all right. But they were super cool, and they were also very good. Orange County and Bill over at Pork Pie were very good to push me in the right direction to get certain tools, certain things to use as far as with wrap, as far as drill bits, as far as how to drill acrylic properly. Like they were very supportive. They were really good.
Oh, that's great to hear. And also, I can contest. You probably don't remember, but I actually called you. I probably would have been. I'm trying to think what year it would have been. Maybe 2002, somewhere in that realm. I called you because again, you were the only Jersey guy that could have, Orange County, and I thought again, I could just go there and go see them. So I remember calling you about. Again, I no way I could have fucking afforded it anyway. But I called you just to be like, hey, I'm thinking about I want a kit, and I was asking you about things, and I remember to this day at no point where you're like, well, buy my drums
Sure,
instead. You gave me all the details. Hey, it's probably going to take X amount of
sure,
time. This is what it's probably going to cost. This is what the deposit will look like. So if you're ready, we take a credit card. Also, another option, just throwing this out there, if you want something a little bit on a faster turnaround, same quality, I could also build you
sure,
something as well. But it wasn't, hey, buy
sure.
my stuff and, you know, oh, why buy by Orange County? I can do it
Good.
better. It was never that vibe at
Oh
all.
yeah,
And I still remember
yeah.
that to this
Well,
day.
I'm glad you do. I've always tried to keep it, because it's bad karma, like I wouldn't want someone,
Hmm.
trying to undercut me. I wouldn't do that to them. It's just a matter of like there's plenty no matter what's going on in the world, people will come back to music. And that's something that they could get into. Parents supporting their children with music, people like, I need to close my eyes from the horrors out there and put their headphones on, just listen to some music and whatever. Music's always there. So people are always into it. They're always going to buy drums and guitars and basses, and not as many basses, but guitars and drums and stuff. And there's plenty of wealth to go around. There's plenty of money to go around. So it's like
Hmm.
it's a brotherhood. And I learned it's funny because I learned that a lot more when I started building custom guitars than with custom drums. Because drummers I felt are
Hmm.
very in all my years, drummers were very they were mercenaries. Who's going to give me free drums? Who's going to give me a better deal? They would always do that. Guys would jump around. They're playing this company's stuff now. In 6 months, they're playing someone else's thing. Um, very, very much mercenaries, as opposed to like guitar players. Like they're like, hey, when the guitar's done, it's done, because they have like seven other guitars, and hey, when it's done, it's done. Drummers would be like, all right, cool, I'm gonna order one of your kits, but I just sold my kit, so when's my kit gonna be done? Like tomorrow? It was always very, very wild with that.
Oh, no, I can, yeah, I've seen it in real
Yeah.
time. Basically, I mean, Buddy Rich is a good example of that. Like, Buddy Rich would play whoever
Oh, of
would pay
course.
him. It had nothing to do with the actual gear. It's not
Yeah.
like, oh, I played this because of sound or I played that because they held up well on the road. Like, no, it was who is going to
Sure.
pay me. And then I've also dealt where drummers show up to the gig and they're like, "Hey, do you have sticks?" Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
kidding me?
Oh yeah,
Like,
totally. You
really?
know,
Like,
it was
like,
very interesting. That was the only thing with all my years of doing Darkhorse and building drums and stuff. There were a lot of like mercenary kind of people, and you kind of got to pick and choose like who you're going to take care of. Because I've seen it with some of these
hmm
companies. You'll see, this company, built this for this big visible person, and then next thing you know, 6 months down the road, they're playing something else. So it's like, and it's like, boom,
yeah.
what happened? Like, it was be all end all, and then it changes.
I think going back to what we said about the birth of all these other
Yeah,
smaller companies doing the custom drum thing, I think that's probably what also did a lot of those guys in is they probably tried to do to get one of the heavy hitters
yeah,
on board and probably built them a very lavish large kit or something that out of their pocket to get them on board as an artist
sure.
roster, gave them a kit, and then within no time at all, they were signed with either a major brand or then you kind of just didn't hear from that company anymore.
One of the downfalls that I saw, you mentioned like Shine custom drums, and Shine was out,
hmm
and they were just kind of like there. But I remember when the first time I went out to NAM, they had a booth set up, and it was a huge booth. But they were trying to introduce like Shine hardware and drums and all these different levels. Like they had this ginormous booth. It was like a pearl level booth, and I know for a fact they did not have pearl level money. You know, I've done two NAM shows for Black 35, one in Nashville, one in Anaheim. I mean, me setting up in Anaheim, I mean, start to finish was probably $14,000. You know what I mean? Getting from Jersey to
Yep.
there, crating my equipment out, my booth, being out there for 5 days, it's a lot. But I remember Shine had like this ginormous booth with stuff. And I went out there with my buddy John, and we're like walking around. And it's like, what are they doing? And like no one was really caring. But it's like these guys just spent a lot of money on this. And then next thing you know, the company, not within a year was probably defunct, you know, just because they go out of
hmm
business. And then Orange County had sometimes they got to the point where like we don't need to set up it now. Like people order stuff from us. We don't care. Yeah.
Well, yeah, they also got in and they got the word of they had the word of mouth and they had internet on their side and their drums were being seen everywhere. Why spend money on that when you can, invest in other things. But yeah, for our listeners out there, we just came back from NAM and walking around, we were literally looking at some of these booths and we were all saying, without doing it, but only being there, we're like, oh, that had to be 10 G's right there. I'm like, or that booth, I'm like, oh, that's got to be 15, 20 grand. Like
Yeah.
there, this year we noticed there wasn't, drums were sadly kind of lacking. As far as like Zildjian wasn't there, Peisty. Well, they were there in the context of they had the upstairs offices just for dealings, but they didn't have displays. But there was no Zildjian, Peisty. Um, Evans was there, but no drum heads. They were doing their sensory percussion stuff. Like so, it was really scaled back. Like you really didn't see that much. And SJC wasn't there, and it makes sense because it's a hefty
It
investment.
is. It's a lot of time. It's a big investment. And the whole thing was like I did it with Black 35. Um, to say I did it, and it was successful. Both ones I did were very successful, but it's exhausting. It's a ton of money. It's exhausting. At the end of the day, NAM, for the most part, with the big companies, is showing people their new products, but ultimately, you're trying to get dealers, and I never wanted dealers for Darkhorse. I was all about dealing with people individually, one on one. With Black 35, same thing. Like the couple of times that I've dealt with dealers for different things, it just turns into a major headache, because I'm already trying to keep a product priced well, but now I got to sell it to this dealer even better. And now I'm at the mercy of them. And, there's so many things, but I realized like I didn't have to do NAM. And I think for a lot of the companies, they realize like we don't need to blow this money on going out there. Like we still have people ordering, like whether we're at NAM or not, they're going to be here. There's a lot
Hmm.
of people just roam around NAM and they're tire kickers. I mean, they're not doing nothing. They want to go. They want to see if you got free stickers, free guitar picks, free sticks. Come play, and they walk around with their cocktails and they go somewhere else. But yeah, for sure.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Um, Aside from the business, I just want to kind of touch base on the Jersey side of things and the what was the Jersey scene like? Because I mean, obviously, Orange County had a heavy influence in the way you build drums and kind of, like you said, the business model of ordering and stuff like that. But how are you able to get some of the guys to play your drums? And I mean, for our listeners out there, you at one point had, I mean, we said Chris Thatcher from Streetlight Manifesto, but you also had, drawing a blank on his name, but Bouncing Souls,
Michael McDermott.
the yeah, the Menzingers, Benny from I even shared a practice space with him from Gaslight Anthem. You had some heavy hitters. How did you manage that?
It's funny because, and again, I talk about it in my book. There's a chapter in my book that's called "Thanks," but the chapter's called "It's Michael, Not Mike." And I devoted a chapter to Michael McDermott from the Bouncing Souls at the time. He played with the Souls for years. He's now, for a number of years now, been the drummer for Joan Jett. He's just a fantastic human being,
Yep.
a beast of a player, such a genuine guy. But Michael, I will say, Michael was he was my first um, big name. And it's funny because I talk about it in my book, but my interaction, I was probably in my second year teaching um, concert band, and it was probably around 2000, I guess, 2001. And I sent McDermott a message on MySpace. So I'm really dating myself. I sent him a message on MySpace like, hey, I'm a huge Bouncing Souls fan. Um, I own Darkhorse Percussion. I would love to talk to you about making you some drums. And I sent him a message on MySpace and I gave him my phone number. And then I remember I had a break from teaching and I was in my band room. And all of a sudden I get a call coming in. And I had a voicemail left and it was from McDermott. He was like, "Hey, Anthony, this is Michael McDermott from the Bouncing Souls. I got your message. I would love to, talk with you a little bit." I was like, "All right, cool." And I called him from my band room, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm a big fan. Love the Souls so much, so influential. Love to do this." And we kind of hit it off right away. And the first thing he was playing on Premier drums at the time, which I was very friendly with them because they used to have a workshop here in Moorestown, New Jersey, down southwest.
That's correct.
Um, at Premier, and I was friends with some of those guys and loved Premier drums from their marching stuff to their drum set. I studied with Tommy Igo, and he was a Premier guy for quite a while. When I marched Crossman, we were Premier. It was just really good. But McDermott, we came up with an idea for like a snare drum that we did that he wanted to like replicate kind of a sound that he had with the snare drum he did in one of the soul songs, Lean on Sheena. And he had this idea and he's telling me about it. I'm like, all right, cool. So we're going to do it. So I made this snare drum that had like wooden hoops on it. He still plays it to this day. If you see Michael McDermott playing with Joe Jett,
Oh, that's
you'll
rad.
see he plays on a black SJC kit most times. And he has two snare drums that he uses. One of them is from our boy Rhino, who's a tour manager for the Descendants. And also he had a
Hmm.
drum company as well, CDC out of Houston. And but he's the tour manager for Descendants. Great guy, great tech, great all around guy. And then he has another snare. You'll see McDermott. It's a black snare drum that has wooden hoops on it, and that's a snare drum with white has white tube lugs, wooden hoops, a black snare, and he still uses it for this stuff. But I started with him on a couple of snare drums we did, and then it was kind of like him and I had a conversation, and he said to me, he was like, "Look, I really love where we are going with things with the business." And he was like, Premiere isn't Premiere was kind of like falling out of the spotlight a bunch. And he felt that I want to give you, being this little guy, the opportunity to like, let's collaborate and make some cool stuff. So that was awesome. But he was my first big guy, and I made him his first drum set. He still uses parts of it to this day. It was a big black um, drum set that had, it was essentially two drum sets in one, because he wanted one for playing mainly his soul stuff, but then he had another drum set that he could kind of mix and match pieces that had like a different size bass drum, some different toms. So he was playing in the West Kensingtons, like a reggae band. And he did some stuff with like Rome from Sublime and stuff like that. So he wanted more of like a hip hop um, reggae style kit, and then he wanted his, rock kit. So that's how him and I started out. But then he gave me that credibility. It was like, oh shit, like working with Michael McDermott, awesome. And then that gave me the credibility, because when Gaslight Anthem was starting to be like noticed, they opened up for the Bouncing Souls at one of their Home for the Holiday shows in Asbury Park. And I went there with a couple buddies of mine, and I went there with the intent of meeting Benny. And McDermott were backstage, we're in the green room, and Benny had like utmost respect for McDermott. And Souls were headlining, Gaslight was opening up. This was as they were coming out with American Slang was coming out, and it was the first time I saw Gaslight. I was like, these guys are great. I was like, these guys are kind of like the Souls meet Bruce Springsteen meets the Clash, and McDermott backstage was sweaty, came off the stage, and he looks at Benny. He was like, look, he's like, you are going to be part of the Darkhorse family. He was like, Anthony is the dude. He's going to take care of you. And that kind of opened up the door with Benny. And then Benny and I started talking. But then there were so many guys, because over the time it just started spreading. Because during my time with Darkhorse, like I built for, McDermott from the Bouncing Souls and Benny Horowitz from Gaslight. But then also I did drums for, the Wonder Years, the Menzingers, Title Fight, Eminem. I mean, God, there was so many dudes that did the drums for, that were cool. But it's funny because they kind of spidered out from guys. They spidered out from like, hey, this guy recommended this. Now they're coming here and they're coming here. So it was really cool. But that just kind of started. And I think my mantra when I did it for all those years was these guys were coming back to me because they loved that I was very personable. I was there and I was able to work with them every step of the way. I was the guy who they dealt with. And when I sold the business the first time, that's when that kind of fell off a bit, because people were like, this isn't the same. Anthony was here, now he's not here, and it's like, this isn't the same service I was like receiving. But yeah, it was really wild, the amount of guys. And actually one of my last years with Darkhorse, when I took the business back, actually, because I sold the business twice. I did. So when I took it back the second time, we were set up at Skate and Surf in Asbury Park, and that Skate and Surf was really like, we had a booth set up there for Darkhorse, which was cool. But at that venue, I had Gaslight Anthem headlining one of the days, the Wonder Years headlining another day. The Menzingers were there. Oh my gosh. There were so many. It was cool because that was my first time like being at a venue where it was kind of like a lot of your SJC guys. By this point, there was like no Orange County kids even there. But it was wild because everywhere you looked was like a different Darkhorse kid. And all the big stages were all Darkhorse. It was a cool experience for that.
What's wild is I saw
the Wonder Years open up at a VFW hall in front of, when I say there was maybe like 23 people.
Sure.
And I think at the time he was playing an SJC kit, but this would have been like 2005,
Yeah.
maybe 2006. And it was like, I thought they were cool, but didn't really
Sure.
think much of it. And then, life happens. But probably around that time when they're now on these massive stages, I'm like, what did I
Yeah.
miss? Like, kudos to those guys.
Sure.
But I just thought that that was like kind of crazy how that happens. But
Oh, for sure.
um, in some like kind of because we're getting to the end, towards the end of this, in some closing thoughts. So you've dealt with the building and everything like that, and the
Sure.
business side of it, and how difficult it can be. So you obviously heard that Orange County had
Sure.
closed. What were some of your thoughts about that?
Um, I think as much as I hate to say it, in my opinion, I think what really happened with Orange County was Orange County was in a position when they were in their like heyday, when it was like Orange County was like the be all end all. They are the coolest drum company in the world. Like their stuff looks
Hmm.
different than anything. They had acrylic drum sets that were like back. Even though Ludwig did them so many years prior, people forgot about them. And then you see them, and you see them like
Yeah.
laser etched and different hardware, lights in them, all these things. They were crazy. But then what happened was Orange County gave birth to all these other companies that they weren't necessarily trying to be like, I feel like Darkhorse wasn't trying to be Orange County. SJC wasn't trying to be Orange County, but we were trying to do something in the vein of Orange County, and if anyone says
Hmm.
Orange County didn't inspire us, they're lying, because look at your drums and look at those drums and look at those badges and look at those parts and look at those spurs, all those things.
Yeah.
Um, you do. And I'm the kind of person, like, give respect where respect is due. Like, yeah, you guys
Right on. Yeah.
motivated me to do something cool like this. But I feel that what happened though was they gave birth to these companies. And I felt like they kind of like up top were like, all right, cool, we're good, we're Orange County, and didn't pay attention to what was going on. And I feel like they're in certain ways Orange County like dropped the ball, because when Orange County could have come in and say we're going to step on everyone's throats and everywhere you look is going to be an Orange County kit from here on end, they kind of stepped back. And I feel like when they stepped back, that's when you start seeing SJC really coming out strong. And a lot of names, like a lot of bigger names, a lot of bigger gear, a lot of similar stuff, really thinking outside the box. And some of these other companies started really picking up their game. And I felt like Orange County didn't pick up their game. They kind of stayed there. And then they just started dissolving. And then it was like, okay, we're selling Orange County to Guitar Center. And we're doing like mass produced stuff. We're doing all Japanese stuff, or made overseas stuff, which I think has its own element. And if you think about it, you fast forward a company like SJC, SJC ended up doing the same thing. Like, hey, we're going to have our custom stuff, but we have this whole line of stuff that's made over in Taiwan, because we can make it affordable, which I get. It's a big investment, though. But with Orange County,
Hmm.
like, it was sad when I knew that they were going out of business. And, they've had so many great guys and so many great players, but then I just felt like it just started dropping off. And I don't know the full like logistics or reasoning why it all fell off the way it did. Um, there's always three sides to every story. I mean, there's one view, another view, and something that's
Hmm.
reality in between. Whether it was money, whether it was interest, whether it was just changing stuff. I mean, even for Orange County, I mean, God rest his soul. I mean, Jeremy was a great guy, and he left Orange County when they left, and he started
Hmm.
Q, like really thinking out of the box. You know, um,
Hmm.
but it was sad when they went under, because I give them a lot of respect, because they changed the face of it. They pioneered it. Like they really did. They really said, we're going to make cool stuff. We used to be like a drum store repair shop, and then we started building stuff and started putting
Hmm.
these lugs that were like things that were different, and it, it was cool, but it definitely stunk when they went under. I never wish anything bad on any of those companies, you know.
Mhm.
But I just feel like at a time that they should have stepped up their game, they didn't. And that's when, next thing you know, you see SJC has like all the flavor of the week bands are all rocking SJC drums, and that was huge. And that kind of pushed them down a
Yeah.
bit, I would say. I hate to say it, but I'm just being honest on it.
No, and that's I appreciate I always appreciate honesty. But yeah, I always I've talked to other guests about this, and it's one of those like it kind of was a hit after a hit thing. So early in the episode we talked about the shark tooth
Yeah,
lug.
yeah, yeah.
Everybody was even yourself, everyone was using the sunlight lugs at
Sure.
one point, and when people were stealing, not stealing, but comping the look
Sure.
of Orange County, I feel like they waited entirely too long to make their own, whether it be because they couldn't
Sure.
because of money or just didn't really think about it. But when they're like, oh, we're seeing a lot more companies rocking the same stuff we have, maybe we should have our own lug. I think that waited a little bit too
Yeah.
long. Also, when SJC was on the rise, I really respect Mike so much in the sense that he saw, like, much like how Daniel saw potential in some of these
Sure.
artists, Mike saw the potential of what social media could
Sure.
be as a marketing
For
tool.
sure.
And the way he was able to network and push bounds on that and really use that to his advantage, I don't think Orange County ever got with
No.
that time, or maybe just didn't see the importance of it.
Yeah.
And then the final kick in the dick, as it's been quoted, is the financial crisis of '08 and '09 might have just been the nail in the coffin for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it. I mean, but you hit a really good point there. One of the things I really respect with Mike, especially at SJC, because I mean Scott's been out of it for quite a while, um,
Hmm.
but Mike, just like SJC, I felt changed the face of custom drums. Mike through SJC continued to change the face of custom drums. Making
Hmm.
social media a very vibrant and robust platform for showcasing things, artists, drums, players, topics, whatever. Showing. I used to love when Mike would show, behind the scenes in the shop and all these other things. And it was kind of like SJC was coming out hard, where Orange County was kind of like falling by the wayside. SJC was coming down hard with like, look at this artist, look at this artist, look at this guy, look at this guy. And then it was like, look at our shop, look at our new shop, look at our new dealers. And it was like, it
Hmm.
was crazy. But Mike really embraced social media as it was really on the rise, and their website, like the development of
Hmm.
things, and they've had plenty of ups and downs. I mean, I talk about it in my book, and I'm sure you've seen it or something like that. But like on the whatever the show was, I forgot what it was called,
The
The
profit.
Prophet. That was such an
Yeah.
amazing episode. I reference it. I was like, this is what I'm talking about with Mike. You watch their struggles. Like you're running this business, you're working with all these artists, but you're $300,000 in the hole, and you can't even fulfill orders. You
Yep.
know, the drum the cost to build a drum set is very expensive, you know, and that catches up to you really quick, if and
Hmm.
when you're doing drums for free for some of your bigger artists, because you're essentially investing in them to get marketing out of
Hmm.
them, that adds up. So like you're buying this kit is costing you $1,000 in material and $300 to ship it. And now take that times multiple players. Next thing you know, you just invested $30,000 hoping on a return.
Yeah,
Hoping.
hoping. Keyword there.
Because I'll
Hoping.
tell you, and I have said this before in other podcasts that I've done and other interviews. What's really hard when people talk to me about business, they know that I've done a lot of businesses. I've had my hand in a lot of cookie jars with things. But what people don't realize is just how expensive everything adds up when you're doing this stuff. And where your investment really comes from. It's funny because people would assume that, you know, if I'm doing a drum set for Travis Barker, okay, I'm going to get a ton of orders coming in because I'm building drums for Travis Barker. But my experience over the years wasn't was never from your big name guys. It was always from your smaller guys in the trenches. Your guys who were playing, you built a drum set for a band that's playing at a VFW hall on a Tuesday night at 8:30 for like 16 people.
Yep.
Those are the guys
Uh-huh.
who 5 people out of that 16 that are drummers or want to be drummers are like, that's a cool drum set. I want to get one of those. I always remember with Darkhorse, I built drums for this band called The Plea for Purging years ago. They were this like Southern, like Christian hardcore band, the greatest dudes, the coolest guys, and I built a couple of really cool drum sets for them. But to this day, I got more orders from through their drummer and their band than any other band ever. No one ever
Wow.
called
Yeah,
me.
I can see
No one
that.
ever called me to be like, "Hey, I want a drum set because Benny Horowitz of the Gaslight Anthem plays one." No one's ever said that. Unfortunately, and
Hmm.
that's not a knock on Benny because he's an amazing guy. It
Yeah.
has nothing to do with him, but it has to do with the dynamic of those bands. A band like Gaslight Anthem, it's the Brian Fallon show. Everyone else is there. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
but the small
Or
bands,
also like it's gonna be seen by the masses more with a
sure,
bigger band. But as far as like you're saying with, actual connecting
sure,
with drummers, it's like, yeah, it's the no-name band playing at Dingbats
yeah,
that you're gonna, probably get your orders from, not like, or maybe some people take for granted, like, oh, they see
yeah,
Benny or, or Travis playing and they're like, okay, well, yeah, I'm sure, they're selling drum sets left and right.
sure.
They kind of just maybe take that for
Yeah,
granted.
I mean, it
But,
was always my bread and butter always came from. It's funny because with drums, my bread and butter really came from my guys who were in the trenches, my more mid-level guys who
mhm.
were hustling. Like I'm telling you, like Wonder Years coming up, Menzingers, like those guys, like coming up in there were like, you know, they had a lot more interest as stuff was coming up, but sometimes your big name guys with guitars, I feel like it was different because with guitars, I would get more credibility. Like where, hey, I made this guitar for Gary Holt of Slayer and Exodus, and then people say like, oh, that's cool,
Mhm.
or Frank Iero from My Chem, LS Dunes, like, oh crap, that's awesome, and I was fortunate to build a lot of cool drums for a lot of cool bands and guitars. I've like equally as cool. Like worked with some amazing guys. Some artists who I genuinely have no right to be building stuff for, but they've just been amazing. I mean to say that like
No,
My Chem or Rich Fortis from Guns N' Roses, I mean Bad Religion, Brian Baker, Descendants, Egerton, Slayer, I mean like it's kind of silly, but it's fun. It's all part of the story.
yeah, totally. And, yeah, I mean, other than you've seen the Guitar Center stuff from with Orange County come out, that's probably where I'm just before just quickly diving into the guitars. What was your thoughts about the product that you saw from Guitar Center?
When Orange County first came out with it. I
Yeah, when
was
they started rolling out.
as a craftsman and as a fan of Orange County, I was just kind of shaking my head. I like the idea that you'd be able to get something affordable that you could grab and go, um,
Hmm.
but it wasn't the same. It's like I had a real problem with it um, compared to what I was used to seeing them create. And then to see something that was just like a different version of it. I just wasn't a fan, and I think for them, I think they thought that they were going to have this Guitar Center like juggernaut of a deal. Like everyone is going to be buying Orange County drums now from Guitar Center because they have these mass-produced kits, and I felt like it just never took off. And I think it never really took off because it wasn't the same. It wasn't the
Hmm.
total same. Just like guitar snobs and may look at an Epiphone as opposed to a Gibson. You know, they're made by the same company, but they're different. And your cork sniffers are going to sometimes be like, I want that one, you know.
Well, you also break it down to. I was saying it yesterday. We had the privilege of interviewing Riley from Thrice. Like when I was talking to him yesterday about it, it's like they inherited this awesome brand and they bought it, whatever you want to call it, whatever deal it was, and they got this, but they never emulated or captured the vibe, regardless of what the product was. I don't think they ever were going to capture that vibe. Or it's I use the reference of an old family restaurant is there and then somebody it's under new owners or somebody bought it and nothing's going to change until something
Sure. Yeah.
changes. And then it just I don't think you can ever capture that. And it's funny enough, like I was going to order a Darkhorse kit and when I learned that you were no longer with Darkhorse, to me that was the vibe's not there
Sure.
anymore. That wasn't I just never pursued that after that because it was like, oh, well, the reason I like these drums that I'm seeing and the reason why I want them was you, and if you're not there, why would I go down that?
Sure.
So that was always kind of my thing.
Yeah. And I
Um,
appreciate that.
um, and last but not least, just for our listeners and from probably my own accord, I know we've been talking for some time, but how did you transition to guitars, let alone recreate that lightning in a bottle where you mentioned all these, guitar idols that you're so fortunate enough to build for? How did that come into play?
Um, yeah, it was funny. Like I did Dark Horse for so many years. Um, and then I realized like I need to be done on business and just focus on my career and education and focusing on just, being a husband, a father, and focusing on education. Um, and I sold Dark Horse to two of my guys. Um, one of them was Chris Thatcher, from Streetlight, and this other guy was John, who was like my right hand man for years. So I sold the business originally to the two of them, and they had the business going for probably about a year, but they weren't like you talk about magic in a bottle and you talk about like I have a certain branding and how I connect with people, and I feel like they weren't really catching their stride as much as they could have been to close those deals, and it was a little bit slow, and they were trying to do it full time, which was tough because unless you're hustling, like that's a tough nut to crack, because you're still paying X amount of dollars for overhead and trying to make money and trying to do this and trying to do that. John ended up leaving the business after a while, and then it was just Chris. And then I came back for a bit to work under Chris to do some building. So I started doing that, and that was cool. And then history kind of repeated itself where Chris got to the point after a couple of years and like he didn't want to focus on the business anymore. He flat out said to me, he was like, "Look, I love drums, I love percussion, I love teaching, I love playing. It's my life." He was like, I'm not a fan of the business side of things," and he wanted to get out. So we worked out a deal, and I took the business back. Um, so I was very energized at that time for a couple of years. I brought in a couple other partners who were with me, and history kind of repeated itself again because then I was back in that rut of I don't want to do this anymore, and my time is too precious and too inconsistent. I'm doing all the work and I'm working all day. I'm going to my shop. I'm working until midnight. I was like, this ain't healthy. I need to be done with this. So I ended up selling the business a second time. And after I sold the business the second time, I was like, I am done. I sold it to my buddy Steve, who I've known for years and who worked with me, and he's currently the new owner, and he's been the owner there for, I mean, the better part of, probably 10, 11 years now, and
Hmm.
I did that. I gave up drinking. I was like, I'm done with business. I've done it long enough. I've made my mark. I'm done. And then I started to mess around with, because everything with me turns into a business. I started messing around with like, hey, you know what? I'm going to start making guitars. And I was like, my idea was doing it basically on a therapeutic level. Just doing like, I'm doing this for fun, for myself, is basically my own form of therapy. Like, I just want to take some time and do it. And at the time, I knew literally nothing about guitars. nothing at all. I like them, and I play three chords, and dig it. And I would buy too many guitars and amps and stuff like that, gear. But I had no idea about building, setup, any of that kind of stuff. But then I started it for fun. Like Black 35 started out as just a venture for myself. It wasn't supposed to be a business. But then, like everything else I do, that ended up turning into, hey, I'm going to sell these guitars. And I started like a big cartel page. And it was like, hey, here's a guitar. And it was like $700. And I just made it, whatever. And then people were buying it. And then another person would buy it. And then another person would buy it. And then next thing you know, it turned into a business. And I was like, all right, well, I guess we'll call it Black 35. 35 is my favorite number. It was Mike Richter on the Rangers, Black 35 roulette. Boom, there's my name. And that's how it started. That's literally
Perfect.
where it came from. It came like in like 30 seconds. So I started building these guitars, and I was making them and making them and making some money. I'm like, this is kind of cool. Um, and then my buddy Rhino, who, like I said, is tour manager of Descendants, and he's teched a lot for Bad Religion, Descendants. He does a lot of stuff. He had a custom drum company as well, also being tight with Michael McDermott. He reached out to me. He's like, "Oh, you're making some really cool looking guitars and stuff." And I'm like, "All right, cool." He's like, "Hey, you want to make me one?" I'm like, "Yeah, what do you want?" And he wanted to do like this army green, like Les Paul style, with like a Milo Descendants logo on it and stuff. And I'm like, "Yeah, rad, dude." So I
Mhm.
was like, "I'll do it." And it was like a day later, he texted me back and he was like, "Hey, um, the guitar looks super cool. I'm super stoked on it. Is it okay?" Stefan Egerton from Descendants really likes what you're doing. Can I give him your phone number? And I'm like Stefan from
Like, oh,
Descendants? Like, are you serious right now? Like, absolutely.
hell
So he
yeah.
gave him my number, and then Stefan shot me a text. And he was like, "Hey, it's Stefan Egerton from Descendants. I saw what you're doing for Rhino. I have a couple ideas. You want to do something?" And it was like an honor to make for one of my guitar heroes, one of my band heroes, with Descendants.
Hmm.
I ended up making him a guitar, and I delivered Rhino's guitar and Stefan's guitar to Starland Ballroom. Descendants were headlining, and went there with my buddy Rob, delivered these two guitars, and like Stefan was my first like big name for guitars. Um, and then it just kind of went from there. And part of me locking down some of these bigger names, honestly, what I tell people out there is like, you got nothing to lose. It doesn't hurt to ask. Like I reached out to people, Rich Fortis from Guns N' Roses. I'm like, "Hey man, you're amazing. I would love to talk to you about trying to build something." And he wrote back. Frank Iero, became a real good friend of mine, and he's a Jersey guy, and we share a lot of similarities. And any of these dudes were super awesome to work with. Brian Baker from Bad Religion, he lives down Neptune. Like we met at a coffee house. I brought like, "Hey, here's the next
That's
I'm doing
awesome.
for you." And some of those bigger guys, I still talk to this day. We'll like rattle off stuff online or whatever, and other guys like haven't heard from in years. They just kind of vanish. But you know, to really answer it. I mean, I started Black 35 on the heels of like getting out of Darkhorse and looking at just like I'm going to change my focus, and it just it was never supposed to be a business, and it turned into the most successful business I've ever run, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that is awesome to hear. And for anyone listening, I've been asked, how did I get any of the gigs I've had, or also how did I get some of these guests on the show? And much like yourself, just ask the hot chick for her number. Like, just go for it. What's the worst that's gonna happen? You know what I mean? Like, what are they gonna say? No. And then you never know what's gonna come out of that. And much like yourself, it's kind of humbling where it's just like I can text some of these guys or go grab lunch with them now, and it's
Sure.
just go for it. That's all I can really say. But
Yeah, those humanistic sides of things are really unique. And one little story from
mhm.
Dark Horse and a story from Black 35 with Dark Horse. When I built McDermott's drum set, I was living in Scotch Plains, New Jersey, and he borrowed his father's pickup truck and drove to Scotch Plains from Philly. and she pulled in my driveway with all his cases, and my daughter Allison was there, and she was little, and she was like just kind of jumping in his cases, and he pulled in my driveway, opened up the bay door, and just kind of like loaded up his drums, and my daughter was helping with it. It was like he was so cute with her, and he has a daughter himself, and it was like really a humbling moment with that, to really, he was off the stage, but it was like those experiences, like I built this instrument for him to utilize, and he's in my house picking it up to go tour with, which was awesome, and those experiences are super rewarding. Same thing with Black 35. I remember the first time Frank Iero came to my house. Like, he like pulled in my driveway, and I opened the garage door, and he came in. He's like, "Hey, Frank." It was the first time we met like in person. And he's in my house, and my kids are there, and they're like, "Hey, Frank." Like, it's like just some dude, and he's so humbling like that. And we went down into my basement, and I had a bunch of guitars and some drum stuff and everything. And he was like, "Oh, it was awesome." He was like, "Guitars are awesome, but let's talk about this." And he goes in one corner of my basement, in my man cave, and I'm an avid Jaws collector. He's like, "Let's talk about all this," because it was just a collection of Jaws stuff, and it was awesome. We like went out, we took a walk downtown Red Bank, and got some Chinese food, and then went to a Starbucks, and just kind of walked around. Like, no one like even realized who he was or anything. And it was good. But I say all that because of those like humbling experiences. To work with some of these guys is like super super cool, super nice, and very rewarding.
No, rad, man. But Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time, man. We're gonna wrap this up, and,
Yeah,
and tell all of our listeners out there to stick around for the Patreon bonus segment where you're gonna again talk more drums
cool.
and some hopefully another story. But man, this has been so awesome, and I followed your career for years, and thank you again for taking the time to talk with us and share the love of Orange County with me.
Yeah,
And
man.
yeah, man, it's been real.
Yeah, man. Orange County means a lot to me. It changed a lot.
Yeah, that's for sure. But again, thanks, guys. That has been the Fully Vented podcast. Until next time, we'll see you.
Yeah, man.